height of the Cold War. This was a particularly remarkable achievement at a time when India had doubled down on its policy of non-alignment and pursued a socialist model of economic development, much to the consternation of American statesmen. For close to a decade, the KIIT revolutionaries deftly overcame these ideological battles. Nehru's dream was realized, the lofty goals of the technological visionaries were put aside in 1971 as India and Pakistan went to war over the liberation of Bangladesh. American support for Pakistan, its Cold War ally, led to a US Senate vote to stop foreign aid appropriation to India. In retaliation, India stopped issuing visas to Americans and KIIT dissolved. But even as the Cold War chill asserted itself in Indo-American relations, MIT continued to be visible at IIT for long after.
People don't understand this fact that the American style of education, which is dominant in India now, really came out of KIIT. The Russian model, German model, all these models completely failed, primarily because there was no such involvement of the institution, there was no such involvement of the intellectuals from these places in setting up the program. They were set up much more bureaucratically.
Well, MIT has a very unique way of educating the students. So the students that come out of MIT are not only excellent in technology, but also very practical. And so combination of innovating and applying that innovation to practical problems is what distinguishes MIT students.
There was a lot of stuff which happened at the MIT undergrad world, which had happened to me in the IIT undergrad world. So I think we were very well rounded and quite well versed in a variety of things which a normal undergraduate here was not well versed in. So I think that was a tremendous education, and at that time it was very good money.
I think there were two things about my undergrad education that I really appreciated, which I realize now did have the MIT imprint and the MIT DNA in that. The first was that in the IITs, even though the major, the branch, you choose when you start. The first year we mostly spent doing the foundational classes, which were common across all the disciplines, sort of like the general institute requirements at MIT. The second thing, and even more as having graduated, I appreciate is in the IITs we had to do humanities classes. Even though it was an engineering program, and that's something that at MIT too is, all students have to do a certain number of humanities classes.
How do you solve engineering problems in an extremely resource-constrained environment? And that is something which IITs taught us. I was working on projects and even one component is very hard. One thing I feel that has helped the most is the confidence it gives you to go to IITs and the network of friends who are also taking it.
IIT is set up as a elite institution not intended for mass education. Only a tenth of those who applied got in, even in the KIIT years, and most of them were men.
In my class, there were 6 women, and about 350 Oh, it was pretty rough. It was quite brutal, in fact.
You know, it was the first time in my life when I was at IIT that I was the only girl in the class. None of the guys, no one would come and sit next to me. To be able to do just as well as a guy, I think was much harder because there was no teamwork, there was no support. And then, you know, when I reflect back at that time, it used to kind of infuriate me a little because the guys would get a cheap thrill out of like taking the air out of our bike tires.
Most of the departments, including the one I went to, at that time there were no women. And all of the projects were, they lived in the hostel together, everybody in that department was in the same hostel, they all studied together, they had papers from the previous exam. You often missed it because you didn't understand exactly what that was about. So there were lots of things like that where you just couldn't figure it out. You have to do it on your own. And then there was just the constant harassment and the constant the condescension, you know, this constant undermining of your own self-esteem.
This was 1972. IITs had already established themselves as top institutions in engineering within India and also gaining recognition outside of India. Even at that time, there were, you had to take the national exam. It was a very, very competitive process. My background was such that neither of my parents went to university. They don't have a university degree. And unlike most of my classmates at IIT whom I met, who had the opportunity for significant coaching for IIT, I did not have any.
The competition to get into the IIT and succeed there was intense, unevenly brutal, and often invisible. Some held on to the hope of a well-paying job in India after graduating. Others dreamed of the chance to go overseas for further studies.
In 60s and 70s, you know, IITs graduated a few students, maybe 1,000. They were doing a very good job in bringing the students up to speed on the state-of-the-art technologies. But we didn't have exposure to those technologies. When I graduated from IIT Chennai, I was in computers.
So at that time in India, the opportunities were far fewer than today. You know, we had very good education at IIT, but research was not on the radar screen of any of the IITs at that time. Perhaps for all IITs and especially IIT Madras, more than 80% of the graduates went for higher studies, and pretty much everybody came to the US.
Even as an undergraduate, I was working on Juggnu, which was India's first nanosatellite project, and Boeing's autonomous vehicle. And all these projects kind of inculcated a wish to do deep research. And US was one of the best places which has graduate research going on. So that was the big motivation. And not surprisingly, a lot of the graduates from my batch come to US for their PhDs.
The 1965 U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Act opened up immigration and citizenship to Asians after nearly half a century. The Act prioritized highly educated immigrants like the IITians, who were amongst the earliest to take advantage of the opening up of America. Many found a home at MIT.
My mother played a very pivotal role. I did have very good grades at IIT. I did very well. So they don't stop here. And if you want to do a PhD, go to the US.
Certainly the sequence of people coming for their PhDs and graduate work to the US was helped along by the fact that the curricula was well understood in the 70s by universities. Still getting good. And at that time we wasn't doing so well. So I worked there for 2 years and I worked in Bombay for a year. I said, okay, time to get a 1-year degree somewhere where I can really learn something different from what I've already learned. And MIT was quite interesting and exciting, so I said, I can get it there.
So I was women in the PhD. And when I first got into the program, which I was also the first woman, there was a lot of interest. And I was also one of the first people to do it in one semester, which was, to get into the program, to make it through the qualifiers. And for some reason, that fact got lost in the fact, in the fact that I was the first woman.
I had my PhD thesis defense a year and 8 months into my PhD. And so I was the fastest PhD in engineering at MIT from start to finish. Probably I was the first Asia bot to be dean of any of the schools at MIT at that time. 140 years after MIT was founded, when the first Indian student to MIT came in the early 1900s. So it took a long time for Asians to have leadership roles, even in institutions that are highly international and cosmopolitan like MIT. Before me, there is nobody from IIT in MIT, right? And after me, there is nobody who's not from IIT.
The IITs were Nehru's dream to industrialize and modernize India, and from that dream bloomed thousands of other dreams. The audacious aspirations of the KIAT visionaries not only created a revolution on the Ganga, but revolutionized technology and enterprise across the globe as IITians made their way to America.
In the 90s and 2000s, because the people who had come outside of India and proven themselves in US some of us became the best brand ambassadors for India in US.
I think the human experience and the things that you learn from either history or literature and the emotional side of things is really a large part of being able to build better products or better systems that ultimately, can make people's lives better, right?
IITs are looked at as absolutely good in their student body. And it shows. It shows everywhere. It shows in the faculty appointments all over the country. It shows in the National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences, that how well these people have done, and so on. So I think we were trained well, and then we performed. Everybody won.
I now invite on stage Dr. Hamsa Balakrishnan, Dr. Sana Iyer, Dr. Ranu Bopanna and Dr. Srinath Raghavan for a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Madangi Krishnamurthy.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion, I would say, but more like a conversation on this really interesting, wonderful film that you have brought to us. And there are so many questions in my mind. We will keep it short in the interest of actually going to be able to see the exhibition itself. But let me start by saying that it's really provocative to bring this film to IIT Madras that says that the American model succeeded but the German and the Russian failed. You'll have a fight from the founder, Dr. Whittier, right over there, but we'll save that for after-event discussions. Let me start by asking perhaps Srinath to set the stage for the context. The Honourable Minister mentioned that in many ways people are transient, even people will pass. But I see the people in this film as symptomatic of larger events in the ferment as you pass through. Different sets of people from different time periods testify to a whole set of modalities. I was sort of whispering to the Ranaswamy over here that, for example, the gender situation in the IIT is now so complex, it's very difficult to be able to say it in a straightforward fashion. So perhaps, Srinath, if I could provoke you to say what happened in relation to the Cold War. We know that it's a competition. It's not a straightforward American win, that there is an ideological fight going on.